Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? Awesome.
Hello.
So we are going to be talking about solar and how to size your solar system for your RV. And I just want to encourage everybody to hit us up on the chat box there, either in YouTube or on Facebook. There's a little chat function. Go ahead and tell us where you're joining us from. We'd love to hear from you. So just go ahead and shout it out from there, and we'll see where everybody is. It's great to be here and online with you guys. It would be so much better to be in person. Can't do it right now, so
this is the next best option.
I guess it is. And so just when we first hit the road in 2012, over 8 years ago, we used to get some very funny looks as we pulled up to our campsite and pulled out our solar panel, folded it out, set it up. People would kind of walk by, and they'd walk by again. They'd maybe bring their dog, and they'd finally get enough courage to ask the question, well, is that a solar panel? Yeah. And then they'd say, does it work? And I'd say, no, I'm just setting it out here. Of course it works. And they'd say, well, what can you run? And we'd tell them about our small system and what we ran with it. But times have changed, and so have the questions. People know that solar is part of the deal, and that it's reliable, and that it works, and they're wanting to know how they can get connected and get into the solar game. This is why we put the presentation together and why we're joining you today.
Cool. And I'm Sherry Gagliardi, and this is my husband, Dave Hutchison, and we see you guys are coming in from various places. Well, we are coming to you from West Texas on the shores of the Llano River. And the weather here, while not fabulous today, is much warmer than most of the country. So we're happy to be in short sleeves. And we're supposed to get that sun back. Speaking of solar, we're supposed to get that sun back tomorrow. So we're looking forward to seeing it again. Now, in addition to the Grand Rapids Camper Travel and RV Show, we also want to put a shout out there to Renogy Solar. They help sponsor this particular presentation. And this is our fourth time presenting at the Grand Rapids Show. First time from Texas. Usually we're in Michigan with you. So we're going to be throwing some light math and some light physics. Nothing too big, nothing too scary at you. So this is a time to grab a notepad and a pen if you think you're going to need it. Because we'll have you thinking about some calculations and some important things to think about as you size your solar powered system. We're going to be discussing the components that you need for your system and how to determine what size of system you need for your specific needs, your specific electrical needs. But stick around because at the end, we'll also be giving out a 10% off promo code for Renogy Solar as one of our sponsors. Now, our goal here is to help you envision a life without the need for an electrical hookup, so that you can boondock and you can live off-grid as much as you want to, or if you want to combine it with electrical hookup and then boondock for a few days or a couple weeks at a time. And we have been doing this for 8.5 years. And I'd say 98% of the time, we are running completely on solar. It's very rare that we go and plug in. And we have had some amazing camping and boondocking adventures in some gorgeous places all over this continent.
So as we mentioned, we've been on the road for 8.5 years, living full-time in this small, tiny 1957 vintage Can-Am camper. We call it Hamlet. And he's 15 feet long from the tongue all the way to the tail. There's a total living inside square footage of 72 feet. It has no bathroom. And we lovingly, as I said, refer to him as Hamlet. The three of us together, we are freedom in a can.
Now, in the last 8.5 years, we have visited 4 countries, 8 Canadian provinces, in addition to that, 51 national parks in the U.S., an additional 10 Canadian parks north of us, countless national monuments, national lake shores and seashores, and more public lands than we can possibly count. But even with all that, it feels like we've barely scratched the surface of this beautiful place that we call America. And our bucket list just keeps getting longer because we keep meeting people that say, have you been here? Have you been there? And indeed, we have not. And we had to add it to our bucket list. So it just keeps getting longer.
Now, when we took off in 2012, we thought we would do this just really for like a year, maybe a year and a half. But, 6 months in, we we fell in love with it, and we couldn't imagine going back to our old lives, 2 careers, and the traditional 3-bedroom house just wasn't possible. It was so much fun, so affordable, and it felt very sustainable for us as well.
So back in 2010, when we bought this camper to start the renovation process, one thing that we knew for sure is that we wanted to run on solar. That was one of our key values, and definitely wanted to figure out how to do that. But all we knew at that time is that you had to have a solar panel and possibly a battery to store some of the energy you collect from the panel. But that's literally all we knew. Completely and totally all we knew. How many of you can relate to that? Are you in that situation where you're like, I know I want to do this, but I have no idea how to do it? Well, you're in the right place, because we're here to share that with you. Now, there was precious little online in terms of resources for solar, unless you were an engineer or had studied physics about a decade ago, but things have changed drastically since then. So we drew upon the knowledge of some of our friends. IonCon is a sustainable design company in our hometown in Boone, North Carolina, and they helped us out. They said, this is what you need, and they walked us through the components that we had to get in order to get a system that worked, and it worked very, very well. But you don't necessarily need a friend in the solar industry. You have us now, so we can be your friends for that, and we'll get you started on your way. So needless to say, we have learned a ton about solar in the last 8.5 years, and we now teach seminars like this. We are previous university educators, and so drawing upon our education background and now doing this type of work and teaching people about how to visit the national parks and how to cook outside. We've done seminars like that all weekend long. We also have developed a number of videos and blogs about this subject, and all of that is going to be available to you. This resource that's right here, you can check that out after, thank you, Hutch, after the seminar is over today. And we're also both ambassadors and affiliates with Renogy Solar. And the main thing that we have discovered is that solar power is simple, it is reliable, and it allows you to camp kind of anywhere for a whole lot less money. And we have helped hundreds of people convert their RVs and vans into a solar-powered vehicle. So let's get started.
Okay, Derek, yeah, perfect. Look at that. Even before I asked. It's been great having Derek with the Showspan crew.
He's awesome.
Running the show in the background. It's been wonderful. So the 4 components that you need, every off-grid solar system is going to involve these 4 components of a different style. Now we're coming to you right now from the shores of the Llano River, and we've been able to get it away and get to Texas for the winter, and that's just one of the benefits of having an RV, living this lifestyle, is to be able to go where the weather is appropriate. Right now I'm wearing shorts. It's not perfect day, but it's probably a lot warmer than it is in Michigan. Not to rub it in, but again, this is the lifestyle you can lead. But these 4 components, they're going to help you live that lifestyle off-grid and powering what you need. All right, here we go. We're going to start over. Number 1 is the solar panel. This is where it all starts. The second is the charge controller. Go back one, if you wouldn't mind. There you go. Perfect. The third is batteries. That's where you're going to store the energy that's coming in from the solar panels, and the inverter. The inverter helps convert the energy coming from the batteries into a usable energy that we can plug in an electrical appliance.
Cool. All right, now we can switch on over to the solar panel.
There you go.
So this is where it all starts. So the sunshine hits the panel. The panel begins an electrical current, and it can be used to directly power an appliance, or you can store that energy into a battery. Now, we use what's pictured here. This is a Renogy 100 watt, they call it a folding solar suitcase. And the reason for that, it has a mechanism on the back that serves as a stand, and it's actually got hinges in the middle, so you can fold it up and store it away. And these come in a couple of different sizes that we will talk about later. But basically, it's wonderful because it's portable. We can move it around, and we can move it into the best sunlight while we keep our camper in the shade in the summertime. So great portable unit.
Great. The next is a charge controller. That's the next up. Well, we had a little visitor.
Oh, yes. We forgot to tell you about this. We had a little visitor. Can you see him in the background?
Sorry, we just had to jump in on the, we had a friend of mine from high school made this for us. So
had to have our own Bernie meme.
Had to feel the Bernie meme. The charge controller. Now, the charge controller is the brains of the system because the voltage that's coming from the solar panel is just going to be, it's kind of a dumb voltage. It just is what it is. If the sun's shining on it, it's one voltage. If clouds pass over it, it's going to change. So that voltage is going to go up and down. But the charge controller, it regulates that voltage so that the battery doesn't become overcharged, undercharged, or charged inappropriately. And it will take the battery through its charging paces. So through the float charge, to the bulk charge, and it helps not only regulate that charge, but it also helps the battery last longer. You got to have one of these. You can't skip it. It's very, very important. We have the Renogy 30 amp Wanderer charge controller with the Bluetooth, the BT1 module, which is a Bluetooth module. And you can see I'm plugging it in there. And that allows you, go to the next slide there, Derek. Perfect. That allows you to monitor your system using the free Renogy Bluetooth app. And you can connect to that Bluetooth module and it'll tell you what's happening with your system. It's pretty cool.
What's cool about this is as we move our portable panel around, the app will respond and tell us how many watts we're pulling at any given time so we can find that best or perfect spot to get the most sun. It also tells us the charge of our battery, which is the third component, and we'll talk about that for a second. So you'll need to have a deep cycle battery or batteries. We have one. We have the 50 amp hour lithium iron phosphate deep cycle battery. Now, we used to have a flooded lead acid battery, had that for a number of years, but we recently upgraded to the lithium iron phosphate, and we absolutely love it. So that is our battery to store that energy.
And if you're, so solar panels, they work on batteries, they work off of direct current. And to change that current, to use a home appliance, you need to change it to an alternating current. Most RV systems are going to be on 12 volts of DC current, and the inverter changes it to 110 volts of AC current. So anything that you need to plug into a wall outlet to run or charge, you're going to need to get an inverter. They can run large and they can run as small as this one, which is a 700 watt Renogy inverter. And this powers for us, it powers two separate household outlets in our rig so that we can plug in and charge up our laptops. We can run an electric blanket. We can run our immersion blender. We can charge up our batteries. We can even run a heating pad. All of these things come right off of that 700 watt inverter, and that helps us do that. So you can, so you have to have one of these if you wish to plug in your household appliance into your RV system.
Just changes it from DC to AC, just like that. So this is a picture of our entire system here, with the exception of the solar panel. So you'll see all the components that you just saw in the individual pictures. And it all lives right underneath where I am sitting. So one of the bench seats of our dining area. So it doesn't really take up very much space at all because it's pretty darn small.
And one of the benefits here of having a lithium iron phosphate battery is that it doesn't have an off gas situation. So you can actually store the battery inside, and that helps keep the temperature appropriate to be charged, because on lithium iron phosphate batteries do have a sort of a low temperature shutoff below freezing, but you can keep that inside and it helps it run a little bit better. And if you're frantically writing any of these components down, you don't need to do that. You can just go right to our website, freedominacan.com, and all of our information on our own system is set right up on that website. And so looking at this picture, you can see we've got kind of a mess of wires, but there is wires leading to a fuse box, and it also leads to a USB charging station, which is up in the cabinet. Those things really didn't add a lot much to the cost of this system. All together with the solar panel, we're looking at about $1,000 for this system.
All right, we can go. There we go.
Yep, perfect.
And we're back. Okay, so our system is pretty small by the standards of a solar powered system, but it does meet our needs. But everyone is different, and you may need a bigger system or you may need a smaller system, depending on not only the size of your RV, but what appliances that you want to run within it. So this is where you're going to have to do a little bit of homework. And this is where we're going to be throwing a little bit of math and physics at you. Again, nothing to scare you. It's going to stretch your brain probably a little bit, but most people get it. And I was pretty good at math when I was younger, but I never took physics. I kind of wish I did at this point because it would have a very direct application. But it's quite fascinating when you really kind of see it in action with solar power. But if you can follow a recipe that has multiple steps to it, you can do this as well. We have complete faith that you can do it. All right. So Derek, if you'll go ahead and bring up that next chart. There
Perfect.
we go.
Okay, so we're going to define a couple of terms that are used to measure different aspects of electrical current. And you need to know these because that'll help you reach your magic number, which is your total watt hours. Now, what do these mean? Volts, amps, watts, watt hours. We're going to use an analogy so that we can understand this if you don't have any experience with it. The analogy we're going to use is a shower. We've all taken a shower inside a house that has pressure, that has flow. We're going to use that analogy to describe these different terms. So volts. Volts is the pressure of the system. And if you were measuring water pressure, you'd measure it in terms of pounds per square inch. And it's the pressure at which liters of water are being pushed through the shower head. Amps, that's going to be flow. And you'd measure a flow of a shower in volume, in liters per minute. Watts is the effectiveness of the shower. How good is it at getting you clean? How satisfying is it? So watts equals volts, which is pressure, times amps, which is flow, and that's how effective that shower is at getting you clean. So watts is the work that the system does. And how long that can do that work is watt hours. You just multiply watts times hours, and you get watt hours. Watt hours is basically how long, in our analogy, it's how long could you take a shower at that pressure and at that flow and maintain the shower. So it's the same thing for an electrical system. Now we're talking about this so you can get your head around that final number, your watt hours, that you will use on an average day, because the amount that you need to use is what you need to be able to collect from a solar array. For some of you, this number is going to be pretty big, and for others, it might be pretty small, kind of like us.
And it truly is that simple. Okay, so we're educators, so we're gonna bring out the whiteboard.
Have to bring out the whiteboard.
Just show you. Let's make sure we don't have a glare on it today.
There you go. That's
better.
cool.
Okay, so in Hamlet, in our camper, we're gonna give you some hard, concrete examples of how we have figured out our amps and our volts to come up with our watts and our watt hours. Okay, so again, watts equals volts times amps, and watt hours equals watts times hours. So what that means is how many hours you're going to use a particular appliance throughout the day is going to be adding up to your total watt hours. So for instance, in Hamlet, we have a set of lights. They're around the ceiling of the camper. You can actually see some of them on right now here behind me. And they are 8 watts a piece. We have 2 light strips, each at 8 watts a piece. So
there we go. I'm trying to find the best non-glare spot. There we go.
What we need to do is multiply those 8 watts times 2. So that's going to be 16 watts. And then typically we run our lights, sometime between 3 and 6 hours a day. It just depends on the season. If it is summertime and we have light late into the evening, we don't need our lights as much. But if it's in the wintertime, like it is now, we might be turning it on about 5 or 6 o'clock. So we're going to use 4.5 hours per day as our average throughout the year of how often we use our lights. Okay, so we do 8 watts times 2 times 4.5 hours, and that comes to 72, and we call it watt hours at this point. Because we've multiplied the watts times the hour, it becomes watt hours. Now our fan, we looked that up and it was 1.9 amps. Now it's a 12-volt fan.
Nope, sorry.
There you go.
There
That's
we
perfect.
go.
It's a 12-volt fan. And we know that because it's a DC appliance. And so we multiply the 1.9 amps times the 12 volts, so right here, to be able to get our watts, and then we multiply it by 8 hours. And the reason why we chose 8 hours, we don't typically run it all day during the day. What we use this for most often than not, other than if we're cooking and we're getting some smoke out of here, is in the summertime at night. We like to sleep cool and we don't have an air conditioner. We typically go north in the summertime to avoid the need for an air conditioner, or try to go coastal in the summertime to avoid that need. But we'll run it for 8 hours at night. And so we want to make sure that we have the maximum usage per day in order to know what size system that we need. So that comes out to a whopping 183 watt hours. Okay. Now let me just make a note here. If you know the amps of something and it's a type of appliance that has a plug on it, that's going to be 110 volts, just automatically. It's going to be 110. So you would multiply your amps times the 110 instead. And that's why you can see that 12 saves you all kinds of energy. So as many 12-volt appliances as you can use, the better. Okay? Especially when we're talking solar power in a camper. Now, another appliance that we have is a blender. And that blender, do I need to drop the blinds, Hutch, to make that a little bit better?
That might be better.
Hang on just a second.
Just got a little
The sun just decided to come out. And I can almost reach it. I think that's going to be better.
There we go.
There we go. That is a little bit better. Okay. So we have a immersion blender, and it's the only electric kitchen appliance that we have. And that is a personal choice because we have figured out how to use propane for just about everything else, and heat water in a kettle and use a French press for coffee and things like that. So this is an immersion blender we use for soups and sauces and fun cocktails and all of that. Okay. So it's a pretty high wattage appliance at 150 watts. Now, we don't use it for hours at a time. We use it for minutes at a time, typically about 3 minutes when we're making something. So 3 minutes converted to hours is 0.05 hours. So we have the watts and we want to know the watt hours. So we will go ahead and multiply the watts times the hours. And that comes out to just 7.5 watt hours. Now you're thinking, wow, that's a high wattage appliance, but it really doesn't come out to much in terms of watt hours. That's why you have to do this math. That's why this is so incredibly important. Now we have more things that we run in Hamlet than what's on this list, but for sake of example, you can see what it is that you need to do for each appliance that you have in your RV. And it's as simple as looking on the appliance itself. Usually there's some sort of label or imprint that will give you the watts or the amps or both, and you can do the math and figure this out. You do that for every single appliance that you have in your RV or your cabin, if you're doing this for an off-grid cabin, to figure out your daily total watt hours. So our total watt hours here, just what's listed here, is 262.5 watt hours. Okay? And if we were to add everything up here that we have in Hamlet that we're running, that would be our total magic number. Okay? Now, to give you an idea of why this magic number is important, it's going to help you figure out how many panels you need, what size charge controller you're going to need based on how many panels, what size battery or batteries that you're going to need to store that energy, especially when the sun isn't out like it hasn't been today, and then it just blessed us with its presence, and then what size inverter you're going to need to run the appliances. So having this list is the first place to start. Now we have 600 watt hours of usable energy in our teeny tiny little 50 amp hour battery. And how we know that is we have 50 amp hours. Write this off to the side so you can see it. Times a 12 volt battery. And you multiply those together and you get 600 watt hours. The hours are already in there because you've got the amps, you've got the hours, you've got the volts, you've got everything you have up here, and it gives you 600 watt hours. Okay, so it's a pretty small battery by comparison to what most people have, but it works for our needs. Cool. All right.
And one of the great things about having a lithium iron phosphate battery is that because that capacity for that battery is 600 watt hours, with lithium iron phosphate, you can use all 600 or most of the 600 watt hours available in that battery. If you have a conventional lead acid battery or an AGM or a gel battery, those are all based on lead acid technology, and you really can't deplete those more than 50%. So if you had the same amount of battery power in or a 50 amp hour battery, you would only be able to use 300. So the nice thing about lithium iron phosphate is that it's kind of double the battery capacity, and it's half the weight. We'll get into that in a little bit more. Great. Now, every situation, every RV is different. There's really no one size fits all. In fact, there's no one size fits all for a specific model of RV. It really depends on how much energy you're going to use, and this is why you got to do the math. It's a lot like sizing an HVAC system for a home. There's the square footage is going to depend on it, how many levels it has, how many bedrooms, but the key feature is how hot do you keep that system in the wintertime? How cool do you keep it in the summertime? That's going to be the big energy demand. So it's how you use your electricity in your RV or van that depends on how big your solar system needs to be. So if you run everything in an RV on electricity instead of using, say, propane for cooking or running the refrigerator when you're off grid, then your magic watt hours is going to be a pretty high number. It might be in the thousands. It might be in the tens of thousands. We've seen some RVs out in the West that have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 watt solar systems on their rig and set up out in front of their little boondocking station. And they're happy. They're able to run all they need off of solar. The great thing about this is that it's scalable from our tiny little educational system to a very large off-grid home system. It's the same four components. It's the same elements. They're just linked up in differently and more complex ways. So with this magic number, this watt hour total that you're going to use every day, when you've got that figured out and calculated, you're well on your way to building an appropriately sized solar system that's going to be sized for your life. Okay, in this resource right here, you go to this website and scroll down below the Solar 101 seminar. There's a link of resources. In that resource, you're going to find a whole bunch of stuff. But one thing is a solar calculator. We really like this calculator. It's very easy to use. It's simple. You just plug in your total daily watt hours, how many days you want it to run without sun, and it will come back with the right sized and the right number of batteries and solar panels. And those you can tweak around with the calculator a little bit to say, do I want to try lithium batteries? Do I want to do gel batteries? Do I want to do lead acid batteries? They will, and then that'll change the magic of what you need to do. You can also mess around with the size of the solar panel. So let's say you found one that's on sale. You can go back to the calculator and you can say, I want to build out my solar panels with 200 watt panels instead of 100 watt panels. And then it'll recalculate what you need to build that system. Again, that magic number is the watt hours. And when you're figuring out the daily amount of solar light and putting that into the calculator, you can use, if you're going to travel in the summer, you can use between 5 and 6 as the amount of daylight hours. Now, again, in the summertime, especially in Michigan, you've got light from 5:30 in the morning till 10 p.m. at night. But not every one of those hours, even though the solar panel might be illuminated, not every one of those hours is a good charging solar hour, because the sun has to get up to a certain angle before the panels are appropriately running at top voltage and amperage. So use that about 5 to 5.5 hours a day. Okay. Are we ready to choose our equipment?
Yeah, we are
sure
ready
are.
to choose our equipment. I've been frantically writing over here to get all this up on the board so we can discuss the different elements or the different components of the equipment. You might need to have to add a little higher there so they can see the inverter there. Perfect. Can you go closer? Cool. Okay.
Yes.
So let's start off with panels. So you saw ours. Ours was a portable panel, or is a portable panel, and it's 100 watts. Now, panels come in a variety of different wattages. They come in anywhere from 50 to 300 watts just in one panel. So the 50-watt panels are pretty small. The 300 watts, as you could imagine, are huge, huge panels that would go on the roof of a large RV. Okay. They come in 3 different styles. So you'll need to choose whether you prefer a rigid panel, which is basically the panel that you're probably most familiar with, that you've seen on RVs or on houses. Those are rigid panels. Okay.
Solar farms.
Yeah, solar farms. Those are all rigid panels. They're nice and durable. They're I won't say unbreakable, but they're hard to destroy. Okay. There's also flexible panels. Now, flexible panels can bend up to 280 degrees. So they can follow a curved roof line on an RV, or if you happen to be wanting to do this for your sailboat, they fit nicely on a boat bimini as well. So any sort of curved surface. And there's different ways that you can install these panels. And we've got some tools and resources in our resource guide here for the DIYers out there.
And we would have gone, if flexible panels would have been available when we started our remodel back in 2010.
Yeah, we
would have
well
gone
might have,
that way for sure,
have
but they
done
weren't,
that.
and now they are. So
yeah,
there's some upsides, there's some downsides.
But we didn't really want to drill holes into the roof of our vintage camper. So that's why we ended up going with the portable. And we can, of course, combine. We can mix and match these if we want to. If we ever want to upgrade our system, or if you want some panels on the roof and some panels on the ground on a portable unit, you can certainly mix and match those together. Okay. So next up is the charge controller. And where panels were rated in watts, just to add some confusion to your life, charge controllers are rated in amps. Okay, so this is the brain of the system. This is the thing that's going to keep that battery charged and regulated. And so you never want to skip this component. People ask us this all the time. You never want to skip it. You want to make sure you have a charge controller large enough for the amps that are coming in from your solar panel so it won't overtax the charge controller. So let's say you have a 100-watt panel. You're probably going to be having 6.5 amps coming in to your charge controller, okay? So, but let's say you want to upgrade in the future and you think you might want to add a couple more panels in the future, maybe, possibly. You always want to get a charge controller just a little bit larger than the amps that are coming into your system. So we have a 30 amp one that's much bigger than what we actually need, but it's kind of the smaller end of the sizes of charge controllers that are out there. Okay. There's also 2 different types of charge controllers. Just like there's 3 different types of panels, there's 2 different kinds of charge controllers. There's the PWM and the MPPT. Now, what do these stand for? Well, I'll tell you. Pulse width modulation. It's a mouthful. And I'm sure that cleared it up for you, right? PWM, pulse width modulation. You know exactly what that is. Well, these names were not designed with common users in mind. These are something that engineers named or physicists named, not with a common terminology is. But in general, what a PWM charge controller does is it allows the voltage coming in from your solar panel to be just higher than what your battery can accept. Okay, these are typically used for smaller systems. We have a PWM or pulse width modulation charge controller. But if you're planning to have a system that's greater than 800 watts of solar panels on your roof or on the ground or some combination thereof, you want to consider going with an MPPT, which stands for, you ready? Maximum power point tracking. I always have to look at it so I don't mess that up. Maximum power point tracking. I'm sure, again, that clears it up for you. But this basically boosts the voltage coming in from your solar panels above what your battery could normally accept. So it's giving it a boost to those volts. And you can often get 20 to 30% higher efficiency by using an MPPT charge controller. Now, they're more expensive because you'd say, well, why don't I just get an MPPT if they're more efficient? they're a lot more expensive than the PWMs. So unless you have a system that's 800 watts or higher, maybe even closer to 1,000, you do not need this expensive piece of equipment, okay? It's not even going to do much for you in terms of the efficiency. But you get higher than 800 to 1,000, and it's going to really help out. So PWM or MPPT charge controller, and it's rated in amps.
So the next choice is the battery. Oh, thank you. I was like, my arms were getting tired. We should have had a little stand.
There we go.
Anyway,
We usually
the next choice is the batteries. Batteries are always rated in amp hours. Again, just to be confusing, watts, amps, amp hours. So when you multiply your amp hours times the voltage of the battery, you get your watt hours for the battery. There are lead acid types, and those come in 3 different types: traditional flooded lead acid, gel, which allows a sideways installation, and AGM. They're all lead acid technology, so that means you can use up to about 50% of, you can draw down to 50% of the battery.
I'll write that up there. I don't think I wrote that.
That's okay. Now,
that's an important aspect of this. So 50% for this, and then 80 to 100.
80 to 100.
I don't write as nicely on the side.
% of the lithium iron phosphate battery, which I already talked about a little bit. So we were looking for resources that compared all of these battery types, and you can find some really good articles. There's a lot of people talking about batteries, but there was no like one chart that could compare all 4 types of batteries. So we decided to make one. Again, you go back to this resource. Our newest blog on the Renogy website is a comparison of battery types. And there's a great chart that lists all the different features, including the price and including the price per watt hour. Because you see, even though the lithium iron phosphate is 3 times the price of traditional lead acid, it's going to last 10 years, which is 3 to 4 times longer than the lead acid battery. So when you are comparing apples to apples, which is that watt hour, what am I paying per watt hour with this battery? The lithium iron phosphate is actually much, much less expensive. So when we cut to the chase of this, it's just saying if you can afford the upfront investment of the lithium iron phosphate batteries, if you're going to use that RV for 10 years, you can probably safely assume that you're going to save a lot of money if you go with lithium iron phosphate now. They have gotten a lot less expensive in the last few years, and they will continue to go down in price. So if you want to put that off for a few years, that's okay too. But no one I know has been upset with their purchase. Yeah. They've been really happy with them.
We're not suggesting that if you have a good battery that you just bought is to go get rid of it, a good lead acid battery.
No, but don't
do that. But think about it when it's time for an upgrade. Definitely give it consideration. And we know it's a huge upfront cost, but like I said, it'll make a difference in the long run. So.
Okay, coming back to the next component is the inverter. It's rated in watts. So you've got watts, amps, amp hours, watts. It says greater than amps. Okay, yeah, and I'm like, let me just look at my notes and say that, right? What you need in terms of sizing this inverter is that you basically need to figure out the maximum number of watts that you could use at any time. So let's say you're using the TV and the sound system, and all of a sudden you're going to kick on the vacuum cleaner. You need to add all that up to make sure that all of those AC appliances are not going to blow the fuse of the inverter. So another good rule of thumb is that your inverter needs to be sized about the same size as your solar array. So if you've got 1,000 watts of solar coming in, you can need about 1,000 watt inverter. But it's good to have just a little bit more power on the inverter, but not a whole lot more power on the inverter, because the inverter, when you turn it on, it takes power out of your battery bank. It's okay. It takes power out of your battery bank to power it. So if you have too powerful of an RV inverter, it's actually going to drain your batteries a little bit faster than an appropriately sized an appropriately sized inverter. There's a couple of kinds I want to point out here. The best are inverters are pure sine wave inverters. And again, that's not very clear what it means, but what it does is it most closely resembles the flow of alternating current that we get when we plug in at our house. There's also through inverters. These are like also known as inverter chargers. And this is for when you're not, when you are plugged into shore power. You're plugging into that 50 amp a breaker at the campsite, and you've hooked up your RV to the electrical system. This inverter will actually go and charge your batteries while you're there at the campground. So if you're gonna come to an RV park or come to a state park once a week, and you can get a charge on your batteries while you're there as well. So that's what you need to get started. And there's some other details and DIY tricks to get you to the installation page. We've written a lot about installation. We've done a lot of installation videos, and we're going to continue to do those in this year. So bookmark this guidebook. Keep coming back to it. Look at our website, and you can always, we're happy to reach out and be a resource. We've helped a lot of people go with solar, and while we do work for Renogy, we are ambassadors for them. We are not salespeople, and we don't work like that. There's never any pressure to buy, and all we offer is we can offer people a 10% off if you go with Renogy. If not, that's fine too. We're happy to be
we just love being a resource for folks, because it is our goal to get generators out of campgrounds. So because you don't go to the woods to go listen to somebody is gas generator powered next to you or diesel powered engine next to you, and solar is almost always there. So is there a question here? Is there something I would need to switch the source from the solar system to plug in at the campground? Well, I guess if I understand your question correctly, Derek, depends on how you have your up. So we're set up for both shore power, 110 volt, as well as running off solar. And again, 88% of the time we are running off solar. So as long as you have, two different ways to charge, you would not need to do that. Does that make sense? Or if you got one of those through inverters and you wanted to plug in at a campground sometimes, and you could plug in, it would actually go through your inverter and actually charge your battery while you were plugged in. And then if you weren't plugged in at all, you would be just simply running off of solar. So there's a couple different ways to do it. But yeah, I mean, a little bit of changes, a little bit of wiring changes, but nothing major, nothing that's gonna, really stop.
Yeah, you wouldn't need like a fuse switch that says, now I'm on the solar system, now I'm on the inverter, and now I'm on the shore power, because they're different systems. You need to have, you're not gonna, if your inverter is powering an outlet like it does in our rig, we can't all of a sudden power that through when we're plugged into shore power. We have a separate outlet which is connected to that extension cord, which runs out to the power outlet at the campground. So
so here right next to me, because we use our laptops at the table, we have some that run off of our inverter, because more often than not running off of our inverter. And then the opposite side of the kitchen, power comes in to that outlet and makes that outlet hot. So
cool.
I hope that answers it. When it comes down to brass tacks and the nitty gritty, we can explain more detail for you.
Great. And what other questions do people have? We'll go ahead and take those now, because there's, again, kind of a delay with the comment stream getting uploaded to where we can see it. So go ahead, and if you have a question, throw it up there, and I'll just say thank you so much for coming and watching, and we'd love to, but do you want to share that promo code?
Yeah, I do. Derek, if you'll go ahead and throw that promo code up there.
There we go.
Yeah, so this is Renogy Solar. They're out of Ontario, California, and I don't do this often enough. I'm going to give a big props to the person who started this company. She's a woman, and she got the idea for this company back in graduate school, and they're now 10 years old, and they are doing extraordinarily well. And And the reason why I point out the fact that it was started by and run by a woman is, I mean, we're celebrating that these days, right? And when we asked her, how many other women do you work with in this industry? She's like, it's like 100 to 1. So there's 99 men to 1 woman out there in this industry. And so she is behind that. Her name is E. And yeah, it's just fantastic. So Renogy.com, we again are affiliates with them. And you can use our promo code, which is CANLIFE. So we like to play off the idea of van life, which is so popular these days. And because we live in a can-hand style trailer, we call it CANLIFE. So just put that in at checkout, and that'll get you 10% off. So if you're spending $1,000 on a system, this is going to save you $100. You can do the math. $2,000 on a system, it's going to save you $200. And we get just a little tiny percentage of that as well. And that helps to keep gas in our truck and food in our cooler and just keep us on the road as well.
So I want to answer Gerard's question. When purchasing a solar panel for the roof, should I get one that can raise up? And I'm assuming you mean like a tilt. There are tilt brackets for, and they're made, you can get them on the Renogy website as well. You can get them in from other manufacturers. And so what that does is that if you were parked, so that the side of your trailer was facing south, you could then raise the angle to get a more efficient charge. You will get a little bit more efficient charge. It probably isn't worth it unless you're going to boondock for several weeks and not move. Yeah. We see this a lot out in the Quartzsite, Arizona, BLM lands, and where people are basically parked for the whole season.
Yeah.
And in those areas, you can for a very low fee. It's like $150 for like 7 months. And that gets you like dump station, and it gets you water, and but it doesn't get you electrical.
But if you're going to be moving around a lot, and Gerard, we know who you are, so we know that you have a portable panel. That portable panel will probably do the trick for you. But hey, if you want to make the investment and add the tilt function to the rigid panels on the roof, go for it. But probably not necessary. But
it's probably not necessary. Yeah. Another option for you, Gerard, would be that flexible panel. There's actually a little bit of they have a surface on the flexible panel, which actually has like a little magnifier bead of plastic on top. It's very, very tiny, but it actually helps eliminate that angle problem with those panels. So the flexible panel would be a much lighter weight solution, as well as it would help you with that angle situation.
Hope that helps. What other questions do y'all have? It does take a while for those comments.
It does take for a while. So just throw it in there. We'll thank our other sponsors. So yeah, big thanks to the Grand Rapids Camper, Travel, and RV Show. Again, it was such a bummer that we couldn't be there in person this year, but we're so happy to be a part of this show in any aspect and to bring our passion and our knowledge to the conversation. And we've been doing this now 4 years, and we just feel like a part of the Showspan family. So thanks for having us back. We'd love to thank our main sponsor, which is Renogy, and they're the ones that help us go solar. And if you have questions, we have a direct line to the engineers there. We can always reach out to them and clarify something that we don't know. Because again, we're not engineers, we're not technicians, but we've learned so much in helping people and ourselves figure out these situations. The Dirt is the #1 camping app on it is one of our sponsors. Thank you for us. Stay Ode. They have a new Pro edition, which helps you get those. I'm sorry. It has
it has a Pro edition. Helps you find campgrounds all over the nation, the public land that is available out there. There's an incredible trip planner that goes with it, as well as offline maps. So if you are nowhere near a cell signal and you need to find campground or a public land, that's a great resource to have, is the Dirt Pro app. Sorry, he needed some coffee this afternoon, I think. And Wheelers, we'll big shout out to Wheelers as well. They are a consolidator for RV rentals. So if you are looking to buy in the future, but you want to rent right now just to see what you like, whether you prefer a motorhome or a fifth wheel or a travel trailer, big, small, you're not sure, a great way to figure that out is to rent. And what they do is they're kind of an Airbnb combined for the RV industry. And you find a rental near you. You just type in your city and what you're looking for. There's a couple different filters, and it's pretty cool. So they're a sponsor of ours as well. So thank you to Wheelers. All right. Was there a final question here?
Nope, it's a comment. It says, thanks for sharing the information. Go Mountaineers. Go Mountaineers.
Go Mountaineers. Yeah.
So again, thanks for joining us. Please reach out to us via our website, Freedom in a Can. Our email is freedominacan1957@gmail.com. And you can always hit us up with any questions. We're happy to help and happy to share this information and try to get you to go solar.